Hey, how's it going, everybody? So, Theo Hybrid here. We're going to be establishing in this new second chapter 2 in the book Boundaries here. What the heck are boundaries? So, we're going to be venturing in chapter 2 here. And for the sake of my legal hide, I'm going to be talking about fair use. Not really. I don't know. You just don't copy things word for word. And I do that naturally. So, give the people their due. Cloud and Townsend here pay their book. I guess it was 19 bucks. I can't remember how much I paid for it. I just bought it a long time ago, so I figured I'd read it because it's helpful, and I needed to read this at some point. So, we're going to be just starting to read this, and we're going to be establishing in chapter 2 what the heck does a boundary look like? So, as we understood the boundaryless life from Sharitha character or whatever figure you want to describe for her, she is a person who lived a boundaryless life and discovering her life is constantly being run over and people are constantly overloading her, not really considering her, telling her to do stuff, and she just hasn't been able to cultivate the idea of no, no thanks, no I'm good, oh but please God, but yada yada yada, whatever excuse people want to make up, and you're like, no, nope, I got things in my plate, I'm good. I actually need to do this for my mental health. So, for without further ado, let's just get into it. All right. Chapter 2. What does a boundary look like? The parents of a 25-year-old man came to see Henry with a common request. They wanted to fix their son, Joshua. When I asked where Joshua was, they answered, "Oh, he didn't want to come." "Why?" I asked. "Well, he doesn't think he has a problem," they replied. "Maybe that's right," I said to their surprise. "Tell me about it." They recited a history of problems that had begun at a very young age. Joshua had never been quite up to snuff in their eyes. In recent years, he had exhibited problems with drugs and an inability to stay in school and find a career. It was apparent that they loved their son very much and were heartbroken of the way he was living. They had tried everything they knew to get him to change and live a responsible life, but all had failed. He was still using drugs, avoiding responsibility, and keeping questionable company. They told me that they had always been giving him everything he needed. They supported him financially at school so he wouldn't have to work and he would have plenty of times for study and school social life. When he flunked out of one school or stopped going to classes, they were more than happy to do everything they could to get him into another school where it might be better for him. After they had talked for a while, I responded, "I think your son is right. He doesn't have a problem." You could have mistaken their expression for a snapshot. They stared at me in disbelief for a full minute. Finally, the father said, "Did I hear you right? You don't think he has a problem?" "That's correct," I said. "He doesn't have a problem. You do. You can do pretty much whatever he wants. No problem. You pay, you fret, you worry, you plan, you exert energy to keep him going. He doesn't have a problem because you have taken it from him. Those things should be his problem, but as it now stands, they are yours. Would you like for me to help him to have some problems?" They looked at me like I was crazy, but some lights were beginning to go off in their heads. "What do you mean, help him have some problems?" his mother asked. "Well," I explained, "I think that the solution to his problem would be to clarify some boundaries so that his actions cause him problems and not you." "What do you mean, boundaries?" the father asked. "Look at it this way. It is as if he's your neighbor who never waters his lawn, but whenever you turn your sprinkler system on, the water falls on his lawn. Your grass is turning brown and dying. But Joshua looks down at his grass and thinks to himself, 'My yard is doing fine.' That is how your son's life is. He doesn't study, plan, or work, yet he has a nice place to live, plenty of money, and all the rights of a family member who is doing his part. If you would define his property lines a little better, it would if you would fix the sprinkler system so that the water will fall on your lawn, and if he didn't water his own lawn, he would have to live in dirt. He might not like that after a while. As it stands now, he is irresponsible and happy, and you are responsible and miserable. A little boundary clarification would do you the trick. You need some fences to keep his problems out of your yard and his where they belong. Isn't it a bit cruel just to stop helping like that? The father asked. Has helping him helped? I asked. His look told me that he was beginning to understand. Invisible property lines and responsibility. In the physical world, boundaries are easy to see. Fences, signs, walls, moats with alligators, manicured lawns, and hedges are all physical boundaries. In their differing appearances, they give the same messages. This is my property. This is where my property begins. The owner of the property is legally responsible for what happens on his or her properties. Non-owners are not responsible for the property. Physical boundaries mark a visible property that line that somewhere holds the deed. They mark a visible property line that someone holds the deed to. You can go to the country courthouse and find out exactly where those boundaries of responsibility are and whom to call if you have business there. In the spiritual world, boundaries are just as real, but often harder to see. The goal of this chapter is to help you define your intangible boundaries and to recognize them as an ever-present reality that can increase your love and save your life. In reality, these boundaries define your soul and they help you guard it and to maintain it. Proverbs 4:23. Me and not me. Boundaries define us. They define what is me and what is not me. A boundary shows me where I end and where someone else begins, leading me to a sense of ownership. Knowing what I am to own and take responsibility for gives me freedom. If I know where my yard begins and ends, I am free to do with it what I like. Taking responsibility for my life opens up many different options. However, if I do not own my life, my choices and options become very limited. Think how confusing it would be if someone told you to guard this property diligently because I will hold you responsible for what happens here, and then did not tell you the boundaries of the property. Interesting thought right there. Or they did not give you the means with which to protect the property. This would not only be confusing, but also potentially dangerous. This is exactly what happened to us emotionally and spiritually, however. God designed a world where we all live within ourselves. That is, we inhabit our own souls and we are responsible for the things that make up us. Each heart knows its own bitterness and no one else can share its joy. Proverbs 14:10. We have to deal with what is in our own soul, and boundaries help us define what that is. If we are not shown in parameters, or are taught the wrong parameters, we're in for much pain. The Bible tells us clearly that what our parameters are and how to protect them, but often our family, other past relationships, confuses us about our parameters. The Bible tells us, in addition to showing us what we are responsible for, boundaries help us define what is not on our property and what we are not responsible for. We are not, for example, responsible for other people. Nowhere are we commanded to have other control, although we spend a lot of time and energy trying to get it. Probably means self-control, not other control. 2 and 4. We are responsible to ourselves and for ourselves. Carry each other's burdens, says Galatians 6:2. And in this way, you'll fulfill the law of Christ. The verse shows our responsibility to one another. Many others have burdens that are too big to bear. They do have not enough strength, resources, or knowledge to carry the load, and they need help. Denying ourselves to do for others what they cannot do for themselves is showing the sacrificial love of Christ. This is what Christ did for us. He did what we could not do for ourselves. He saved us. This is being responsible too. On the other hand, Galatians 6:5 says that each one should carry their own load. Everyone has responsibilities that he or she can carry. These things are on our own particular load that we need to take daily responsible for and work out. No one can do these certain things for us. We have to take ownership of certain aspects of life that are our own load. Sorry, just stretching out. The Greek words for burden and load give us insight into the meaning of these texts. The Greek word for burden means excess burdens, or burdens that are so heavy that they weigh us down. These burdens are like boulders. They can crush us. We shouldn't be expected to carry a boulder by ourselves. It would break our backs. We need help with the boulders, those times of crisis and tragedy in our lives. In contrast, the Greek word for load means cargo, or the burden of daily toil. This word describes the everyday things we all need to do. These loads are like knapsacks. Knapsacks are possible to carry. We're expected to carry our own. We're expected to deal with our own feelings, attitudes, and behaviors, as well as the responsibilities God has given to each one of us, even though it takes effort. Problems arise when people act as if their boundaries are daily loads and refuse to help. Boulders. Are daily loads and refuse help, as if their daily loads are boulders they shouldn't have to carry. The results of these two instances are either perpetual pain or irresponsibility. So just to break it down smallly, you have the two Greek words for burden, you have the other word for load. And loads are pretty much the things you carry on your own, you can handle it yourself. Then you have burdens or things that are too heavy to bear, so you need help to bear your burdens. So they are burdens. They aren't just responsibilities, but they're responsibilities in excess. So in order to fulfill these burdens, you need help. So when you need help, you call for help because you can't bear it alone. But in contrast, you have loads that are good for you to handle, and it's healthy for you to handle because you need to take care of your own responsibilities because they're within your power to take care of. Moving on. Lest we stay in pain or become irresponsible, it is very important to determine what me is and where my boundary of responsibility is and where someone else's begins. We will define what we are responsible for in the later chapter. This later chapter. From now, let's look more closely at the nature of boundaries. Good in, bad out. Boundaries help us to distinguish our property so that we can take care of it. They help us to guard our heart with all diligence, Proverbs 2:23, North American Standard Bible. We need to keep these things that will nurture our inside fences and keep things that will harm us outside. In short, boundaries help us keep the good in and the bad out. They guard our treasures. Matthew 6:19-20. So that people will not steal them. They keep the pearls inside and the pigs out. Matthew 7:6. Sometimes we have bad on the inside and good on the outside. In these instances, we need to be able to open up our boundaries to let the good in and the bad out. In other words, fences need gates in them. For example, if I find some pain or sin within, I need to open up and communicate it to God and others so that I can be healed. Confessing pain and sin helps to get it out so that it does not continue to poison me on the inside. 1 John 1:9, James 5:6, Mark 7:21-23. And when the good is on the outside, we need to open our gates and let it in. Jesus speaks of this phenomenon in receiving him in his truth. Revelations 3:20, John 1:12. Other people have good things to give us, and we need to open wide our hearts to them. 2 Corinthians 6:11-13. Often we will close our boundaries to good things from others, staying in a state of deprivation. In short, boundaries are not walls. The Bible does not say that we are to be walled off from others. In fact, it says that we are to be one with them. John 17:11. We are to be in community with them. But in every community, all members have their own space and property. The important thing is that property lines are permeable enough to allow passing and strong enough to keep out of danger. Wouldn't that be semi-permeable? Often when people are abused while growing up, they reverse the function of boundaries and keep the bad in and the good out. When Mary was growing up, she suffered abuse from her father. She was not encouraged to develop good boundaries. As a result, she would close herself off, holding the pain inside. She would not open up to express her hurt or get it out of her soul. She would also not open up to let the support from the outside in to heal her. In addition, she would continually allow others to dump more pain into her soul. Consequently, when she came in for help, she was carrying a lot of pain, was still being abused, and was walled off from support of the outside. She had to reverse her ways of boundaries and how they worked. She needed fences that were strong enough to keep the bad out, and the gates in those fences to let the bad already in her soul in and let the good she desperately needed. I'm just going to be real with you. I don't understand what that last part was. I read it and it didn't make sense, but hopefully you got it.